Fun. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. We are approaching our 300th episode, and we're excited to be bringing this to you every week. Started right around COVID in 2020. That feels like 100 years ago for me. So I'm super excited this week. I got a great question for you. And we try to start with one every week. And I'm rattling my brain on this one because I can't come up with the answer. So I found the guy that's going to give us the answer, among other things. And the question is kind of simple, but it's like pretty deep when you think about it. And the question is, what makes something impossible? And did some research on our guest today, and he's able to kind of share some of the answers on this and tear back the shroud a little bit. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Keith Ellis. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're the founder of Superpower Coaching. And so fill us in on what is Superpower Coaching? What's going on with you guys today?
Well, it's all wrapped into this idea of impossibility, and I've got a new book out called How to Make the Impossible Easy,
Okay.
and there are 10 breakthroughs in the book, and if each one of these breakthroughs can completely transform your life at the speed of thought, but if you put them all together, you unleash or harness is probably a better way of looking at it. What I call the 10x superpower. So
Okay.
I coach people on the 10x superpower, and that's where superpower coaching comes from.
Oh man, I'm super excited to jump into this. And I was thinking about this and I'm like, what does make something impossible? And you kind of alluded to it in as a brain thing and a thought process. So why don't you start with that for somebody listening? Because let's just be real, we use impossible probably like we use love, right? We love pizza just like we love our wife.
Yep.
This is possible is probably just kind of a word we don't even know that we're using. So kind of fill us in on what does make something impossible if we're at that spot right now, either in our professional journey or in our personal journey.
It's a great question, and I like the frame you put around it too. It makes a ton of sense to think of it as something we kind of throw out there without necessarily understanding what it means, but it has some profound implications in our lives. So there are 2 points of view. Let's step back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Impossible is a point of view.
Okay.
Impossible is an opinion. It's not a
Okay.
fact. And we tend to treat it like it's a fact, right? And there are really 2 points of view that we can talk about. I only focus on one of them. One of the points of view is what's possible in terms of the laws of physics, right? And what's impossible. So you
Sure.
can't go faster than the speed of light. You can't be in two places at the same time. Although quantum mechanics is now telling us that might not be the case, right? But let's assume for a moment those things are physically impossible. I'm
Yep.
not dealing with any of that stuff. I'm dealing with something else, and it's what's impossible here, right
Yeah.
between your ears.
Okay.
Impossible is whatever you say is impossible. So if you say, gee, I'd really love to do X. X could be travel around the world, grow my business by a factor of 10, have a better relationship with my wife,
Yeah.
meet the right person, whatever it is. You can say, that's what I want, but it's just not going to happen for me. It's impossible. That's what I focus on. And I never try to talk somebody out of that. I always, if you think something is impossible, you're right because
Yeah.
you've set the stage. You essentially have put yourself in this box and you cannot get out of this box until you start thinking differently. So what I coach people on doing is embracing the impossible. In fact, what you want is to commit to something that you think is impossible. And then suddenly all kinds of amazing things happen because your brain finally says, oh, he doesn't think that's impossible anymore. I guess I better get cracking on this. And it changes everything.
Sure. Well, I think it's Henry Ford that said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yep.
So it kind of starts in our brain. And, I'm glad that you made that distinction about that, Keith, because I was thinking about how would you ask, if somebody said, I want to run a mile in a minute, obviously that's one of those, at this point, I don't know, again, if it's ever possible or what, but there are some of those physical things that are not possible. And so
Right.
I'm glad that you just made a distinction there to kind of eliminate the naysayers. So for the people that are listening that are interested in learning this, now we're going to focus on that second side. And I love the fact that you said impossible is your opinion, not a fact. And I think this is where we sell ourselves short. I could never, like I watched your video about, 10,000% growth, and people like you said are talking about, um, you know, 30% growth, 20%, 5%, these limited numbers. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, that just kind of put the whole thing in a different perspective. But it really started with my mind because I can see a 20% growth. I can see a 30% growth, like you said, doubling sales, tripling, 10x, whatever number that is inconceivable. It seems like we put those limitations on ourselves. And I'm just curious, is it like something we're born with, or is it just our surroundings that are like, hey, you'll never be able to do this? Do you know where that comes from?
So shut me up when I talk too much, okay? But you're touching on one of my favorite topics. So think of it this way, okay? You're 11 months old. You're crawling around the carpet, and you're bound and determined to walk. You're physically unable to walk. You're emotionally unable to walk. You're psychologically unable to walk. But damn it, you're going to walk, right? And you keep trying, and you keep trying, and pretty soon you're walking. Then what happens? Then you're running. And what was impossible is now so easy that you're running. And as any parent can tell you, life changes when your kids start running around, right?
Yep. Yep.
So you've done this in your life. You did it again when you learned how to walk. We talked about walking, talk, read, write.
Yep.
You did it when you learned how to ride a bike. That was impossible for you at one point. You did it when you learned how to drive a car. So we have this whole track record of committing to something, just being determined to do something that we knew was impossible. But we didn't let the impossible stop us, even though we knew it was impossible.
Sure.
And then we get to a point where we stop growing. And I define that as we stop getting taller, okay? And some people just kind of stay there. That becomes their comfort zone. And whatever they've got, whatever comes their way, they're satisfied with. That's fine. More power to you. But I got to the point in my life where I realized I want more than that, right? So how do I get it? And I realized that same instinct, what I call the impossibility instinct, that same instinct is there. It's just gone dormant. So whatever let me do these things like walking, talking, riding a bike, driving a car, whatever let me do these things, whatever that process was, I can invoke that process now. But instead of doing it instinctively, instead of having nature drive me forward, I have to make a choice. Sure. So it's committing to the impossible and achieving it now becomes a choice instead of something that just happens automatically. So we all have this, and there are other examples, by the way. I gave you the sort of the instinctive examples, but we all have examples of having done something that we look back on it and say that was impossible. I mean, a classic example is income. I mean, what income were you making when you graduated from high school, right? Yeah. Now what are you making today? 10 times more, 100 times more, 1,000 times more? Yeah. If you looked ahead at today when you're 18 years old, what would you have thought? Oh, that's impossible. I could never be earning that kind of money, right? Yep. But you did it. So what I do is I never try to convince somebody that what they think is impossible is actually possible. That's up to them. They are the one that are fashioning this box, right? They're the one putting the box around their head. That's fine. What I do is an end run. And I say, okay, that's impossible. If you want it enough, commit to it. And if you don't want it enough, find something that you want enough that you commit to it. I don't care that it's impossible. Doesn't matter. In fact, if you committed to something, you were talking about sales, so let's take that because numbers are easy to deal with. Let's say you wanted to double your business, right? You say, that's very ambitious, but I want to double my business. Okay, is that possible? Yeah, I think I can do that. Then you're not being ambitious enough. As a friend of mine once said, add a zero to it, right? Yeah. So what I have done is I take impossible, I've assigned a number to it, and it's 10x, right? 10x has been around for a long time, the concept of
Sure.
10x. I use it as sort of a placeholder. 10xing anything in your life is probably such a big leap that it's impossible. And if it's not, then you should be more ambitious than that. But 10x is just kind of shorthand. So I interchange impossible and 10x, which is where the 10x superpower comes from. But what you do is when you commit to the impossible, what you think is impossible, you define it, your brain suddenly goes, I need to get going on this. He's serious about this. He was telling me not to worry about it. He waved it off. It's impossible. I'm not going to play with it at all. Not even entertain the idea. But once he starts thinking, okay, I'm committed to it anyway, then your brain goes, oh, let's see how we can make this happen. So anyway, that changes everything. Suddenly your brain focuses, your mind clears, and you have a way forward that you didn't even know existed because you never even entertained the thought.
Sure. Wow, that's awesome. Is this like I wrote down the word semantics because I want to sometimes, this fake it till you make it type of thought process that's out in the world, it seems kind of fake to me. And I'm just curious your thought because if I don't think I can do this, but I want to do it, or I want to, speak it and it happens type of thing, how does that work into this? Because who here on this call today wouldn't love to make 10 times more than they're making? The vast majority of people, I'm sure everybody's got, their reasons not to, but the vast majority of people listening, I'm guessing in this, Keith, would love to make that.
Right.
Now, is that possible? If you're working in corporate America, and I'll ask about your story in a minute, but I'm just curious, how does that, like, for somebody that wants to do it, but like they don't think see, I said it, I was just going to say it, they don't think it's possible.
Right.
So
Right.
do they find if 10x is too much, do they find kind of that level where they feel it is doable? Where do you start with this kind of thing?
So again, a great question, and to me, the way we look at our own lives, we define all that stuff for us. So if we think it's impossible, it is impossible, right? To me, what I care about is the commitment. Again, it's the toddler learning to walk, right? I don't care whether it's impossible. It doesn't matter. I just want to know if you want to do it enough. And if you want to do it so much that you'll keep trying, that you're willing to do whatever it takes. You'll pay whatever the price is. If you're committed to something, then you don't care about whether it's possible or not. You just proceed, right? Now, how do you proceed? And this is really sort of the secret sauce here.
Yep.
When you say something is impossible, what you're really saying, and I'm using the generic you here, I'm not talking about you,
Yep.
Dave,
Yeah.
but when
Yep.
you say something is impossible, what you're really saying is it's impossible for me. I am incapable of doing it. I do not have the capabilities to do it. So when my clients tell me that, and it happens all the time, I always just ask them a question. Well, what if you added capabilities? And it's just amazing. They just go, but what do you mean? What if you became more capable? Okay. Suddenly, they realize that they've been telling themselves they're incapable, and I'm simply suggesting what happens if you get more capable. So they open themselves to that, and then we start talking about how to add capabilities. And the secret sauce, or the dirty little secret of the impossible, if you will, is that you keep adding capabilities until it becomes possible. This is truly not rocket science, but it's not how most of us use our brain. Most of us lead with the impossible. We let ourselves off the hook and say, I'm not going to go there, I'll go somewhere else. So I'll settle for 20% or 30% or even 100%, and that's good enough for me. And that's fine. But if you say, man, I need to grow my business by 1,000%, I need to expand across the country or go international. And it's not just revenue we're talking about, it's impact. I want to have this kind of impact on the world, right? And if you say it's impossible, okay, do you want it? Do you want it enough to make it happen? And if you do, then let's figure out what capabilities you need to add to make it possible. Because what happens, the sort of unsaid thing here, and let's make it explicit, the real benefit of this whole process is not the goal. If you say I want to, grow my business by 1,000% in 3 years, that's sort of my favorite idea of an impossible goal, because most entrepreneurs, and that's who I deal with, entrepreneurs typically, most of them would say that's impossible, and that's exactly where I want them to be, right? If they're committed to it, that's what I want. But if you think about something like that, you think about a goal like that, the benefit isn't growing 1,000% in your business. The benefit is becoming the person who can do that, is increasing your capabilities so you can do that. To make the impossible possible means you have to grow. And that's, to me, the big payoff. That's what life is all about, growing, becoming more than we are, developing our potential. That's the payoff. That's the benefit. That's the ultimate objective. In fact, that's the reason we exist. And all of life is that way. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? That's not just a saying. It's true. You're either growing or you're dying. And I prefer to be growing as long as I can. And that's what I coach.
Wow. So do you think that self-limiting thoughts and words come into play in this scenario right here?
Oh,
Where
Lord, yes.
you think it, you're saying it, like you were talking about, I was thinking about 1,000% if we wanted to grow 1,000% in 3 years. What does that look like in a number? It's fun to look at, and then you look at the number and you're like, holy cow, how does that work? Right.
Exactly.
And so then my brain, because I've been learning about the brain and its number one goal is to protect me. Well, in whatever way, that's why I can't tell someone, hey, take a pen and stick it in your eye, because your brain's like, dude, that's not going to work, right?
Right.
We don't walk in front of traffic, etc. But our brain can also be detrimental to our growth in this, I think, because that's the same brain that won't let me poke myself in the eye. Also is like, be real here on this 1,000% in 3 years.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to work 24/7, or it comes up with all these reasons. So is that kind of normal for people? They start getting those reasons
It's
why it's not going to work.
it's so normal. It's sort of the classic way we deal with things, because you really hit the hidden objective. So let's take, again, it could be any part of your life you could grow, you could set an impossible goal. But let's talk about revenue, because that's easy to quantify.
Sure.
If you think I want to have 10 times more revenue, your immediate reaction is I have to work 10 times harder. I can't work 10 times harder. There aren't 10 times more hours in the day. I can't do it. So you're kind of stuck there. And that's why I say, and I never try to convince somebody that what they think is impossible is actually possible. That's not the point. The point is, do you want it or not? And if you want it, your brain will start trying to figure that out. So a case in point, here's the thing that is really hardest to get people to wrap their brains around. It's actually easier to achieve an impossible goal than it is to do what you're doing now. And the reason for that is what you're doing now, the classic 80-20 thing, right? 80% of your activities give you 20% of your result, 20% give you 80% of your result. We've all heard that. Mm-hmm. I've always wondered, okay, that's great, but how do I know in advance what's a 20% and what's an 80%? They don't tell you that, right? Yeah. You measure it after the fact, and you say, oh, if these 80% of customers only gave you 20% of result, you should have paid attention to these 20% of customers. Great. Yeah. How do I do that in advance? And that's what committing to an impossible goal does, because what happens is what got you to this point in your life won't get you to impossible. That's a critical thing to wrap your brain around. And it's hard for people. Yeah. What got you to this point can't take you to impossible, because our instinct is to say, okay, I want 10 times more than what I have. That means I have to work 10 times harder. What I'm really saying is I have to do what I'm already doing, but 10 times more of it. And you can't. So you have to do something different. And that's where the brain unlocks this incredible superpower, because it says, okay, all this stuff that you're doing, I mean, literally all of it, or at least 80% of it, It's gone. It's distraction. It's noise. It's not going to get you there. What will get you there? And now your brain focuses like a laser. If you're going to grow your business by 1,000%, well, let's step back. If you're going to grow your business by 30%, there are probably 1,000 things you could do, right? Mm-hmm. Which one should you do? Sure. You can't evaluate all of them well enough. You can't know enough about every opportunity to judge it properly. So what you end up doing is you say, I'll do this, this, and this. You throw the dice and hope it works. But with the impossible, your brain says, none of this stuff is going to get me there. No. Here's one or two things that can get me there. And now your entire focus is on that. That's why it's easier. Because your brain isn't distracted by the 80%. So the answer to the question of how do you tell the difference between the 80% and the 20% is to commit to an impossible goal. That's it. And it makes life so simple. And again, it becomes easier once you embrace that concept, if you will. And you talked about negative thinking, and I just want to touch base on that because that's such a profound part of this. Think back to when let's say you were in second grade, and you were asked to draw a cow, and you drew a cow, and all of the kids around you were drawing cows, and you looked at yours, and it looked kind of like an ashtray. I mean, it was, and so what did you conclude? I've got no creative talent. I can't draw, right? So you go through life and you keep getting these opportunities to show creativity, and what do you tell yourself? I'm not creative. I can't do that. So you grow up, and that's hardwired. That's part of your impossible. You can't do this. So one of my favorite things to do is when I'm talking to a client, we talk about imagination a lot, and they'll go, but I don't have any imagination. And I always say, that's cool. Did you realize that that's an active imagination? Yeah. And it's like they'd never thought of it that way before. Yeah. So we have all this stuff we programmed into ourselves. And back to the drawing for a second. If you allowed yourself to learn how to draw and your hand-eye and your brain and all that stuff caught up with the drawing, you might have been an artist. But you didn't allow yourself that. I had that with hitting a baseball. I struck out on a batting tee when I was in sixth grade. Seriously, I struck out on a batting tee. So what did I conclude? I can't hit a baseball. Sure. Fast forward several years, never even bothered to try anymore. And now I'm in gym class in high school, and this guy's throwing me a pitch, right? Yeah. And I got to hit it. And I knock it over the fence. And cool. I remember thinking, what happened? What changed? And the answer is my hands and eyes and brain started working together. Took a few years for that to happen. But I would never have stepped into that batting box if my teacher hadn't said, get your ass up there, Ellis, right?
Absolutely.
So it's just, we do these things to ourselves, and all I'm trying to do is say, I can't convince you that you are more talented than you are. I can't do that. Yeah. But if you want something enough, you'll find the way to make it happen. That's really my message here.
Sure. Wow, that's awesome. I want to take a quick break because when we come back, I want to unpack that adding capabilities piece because I wrote that down, and I think that there's some gold there that we need to mine for. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Keith Ellis, the founder of Superpower Coaching. And we are unpacking this, what makes something impossible. And you mentioned early on about adding capabilities. So I wrote that down, but then I immediately added my own kind of, thought process to that. And so I want to, I want to understand what you're thinking when those words are there so that the listener is able to, make some connections in their own life. So adding capabilities means what to you in this situation, Keith?
All right. So this new book I have is called How to Make the Impossible Easy. It's broken into 10 breakthroughs. The first breakthrough, and any one of these breakthroughs can change your life. The first breakthrough is embracing the impossible. We've been talking about that. Mm-hmm. The second breakthrough is just really intriguing. when you commit to the impossible, again, let's go back to the business example. You want to grow your business by 1,000%. And let's put a number on it in 3 years. That's a good goal, right? Totally impossible. Freak most people out. That's your goal. And you're committed to it. You want to make it happen. Grow your business 1,000% in 3 years. So your immediate reaction is, the way we've all been taught to think is, how do I do that? And the answer is, that's the wrong question. That's a very useful question. How do I do that? And we've used it many, many times throughout our lives, and we'll keep using it. But in this case, when you're going after the impossible, a better question is this: who can help me do that?
Okay.
Now you're thinking not how, you're thinking about who. There's a book by that title by a guy named Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy, Who Not How. It's a brilliant book. But it all deals with this idea, and think about this from a capabilities point of view. Impossible means you think you're incapable of it. If you want to achieve it, you have to add to your capabilities. There are lots of ways to do that, but the easiest way to do that, find someone else who has the capabilities you lack, right? Now suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's like cheating, right? I want to grow my business. I need a brilliant marketing guy. I can just get a brilliant marketing guy. I can collaborate with somebody. I can find somebody who loves to do marketing, lives and breathes it, and is really good at it, and add that person's capabilities. And you say, well, wow, okay, I need somebody who can get our books in order because I'm lousy with this stuff. Get somebody who's a financially competent person to do that. Yeah, I need somebody to do product development. Whatever it is, you can find people who are really good at what you need, and you bring them in, and that could be hiring them. It could be a contract basis. It could be sharing revenue. It could be giving them ownership. Lots of ways to compensate somebody. But the trick here is to find somebody who has the capabilities you know you need, but you don't want to get them yourself.
Sure.
So you add them to it, and once you start thinking in terms of this who, I call it who thinking. Mm-hmm. Once you and I'm not talking about the Grinch Whoville, but it always comes back to that. Somebody always brings that up. Once you're doing who thinking, you realize, okay, I can add one guy, I can add two guys. But there's no limit to this. I could add 5 guys or 50 guys. I could have 500 guys. And I say guys, gals, whoever. You can add all the talent you need. And once you understand that, once you really get this who thinking, you realize there's no limit to this. Yeah. I think 10x growth is a big deal. Mm-hmm. 100x growth, 1,000x growth. All I have to do is bring in the right capabilities. Now, there's some management involved, there's some thought involved, there's recruiting, all that stuff. But once you get that in your mind, then you realize I can actually accomplish this. I can add whatever capabilities I need. And that's a profound change for most people, because most of us just don't think that way.
Well, and I think I mentally turned a corner when I went from the beginning part of it to who, because all of a sudden I'm thinking it's not possible. Me adding that word who can help me, all of a sudden there's a glimmer of hope, however small, however limited, but it all of a sudden kind of opened up a whole different strategy for me, thinking who can help me. That means that it is all of a sudden possible. How do you deal with people, Keith, that already have the marketing, already have the accounting, already have the sales, they already have kind of all the people in place that can help them? Maybe they're not utilizing it right. Maybe they're, just limited in that capacity. What would, like, if somebody listening already has that, how do you kind of respond to that?
Well, having that means they have something at the level they currently are. It's what's gotten them to where they are. As Dan Sullivan, this guy that wrote the book about Who Not How, likes to say, and Dan's a brilliant entrepreneurial coach, he likes to say, and I love this phrase, I don't think this is his phrase, but he loves to quote it, what got you out of Egypt is not going to get you to the promised land. what got you here is not going to get you there. So if you've got marketing and finance and bookkeeping and all that other stuff, and most businesses do, that means you're equipped to do what you're doing now. So the real question is, you want to go 10x, because that's our sample, our example goal. You want to do 1,000% growth. Now you need to figure out, what capabilities do I need to do that? My current marketing is not going to get me to 1,000%, or we'd already be there, right? All my current product development, my current suppliers, whatever you want to plug into that, it's not going to get me there, or we'd already be there. So what I need to do is start answering the questions: who can help me in this area? Who can help me in this area? Who can help me in this area? And there's a wrinkle to this, and that brings us to the third breakthrough, which is what I call joy strengths. So that underlying all this is the idea that most entrepreneurs create a business to do something that at some level they love, or at least they're really good at it. They're a plumber, or they're a marketing guy, or they're a programmer, or whatever, right? And this is their thing. They like it.
Yep.
And then they get some success. And then they spend their day doing stuff they don't like, like bookkeeping or marketing or whatever it is that isn't who they think they are. But they run the business now. They got to get the payroll. So that's how they're spending their time. And what I want them to do, this is where it's actually easier to go 10x comes in. I want them to do less. In fact, I will only work with people who are committed to doing less than they're doing now. And this is hard for entrepreneurs because they hate to give up the reins, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But if you think about it, you think, okay, I need this marketing guy. I'm not saying you take tasks you hate and you dump them on somebody else. That's the way most of the world delegates. That's certainly the way most big companies delegate. And what it means is you take some crap off your table, give it to somebody else, and the poor guy who gets it delegated to him thinks, here's some more crap rolling downhill. Right? That's life. That's how I earn my paycheck. That's not working for anybody. What I'm talking about is figure out what it is you want to do in your own business. What do you enjoy doing so much that you'd probably do it for free, and you're really good at it? And by the way, you're so good at it that you probably really enjoy it. It's like this circle, right? I enjoy it. I'm good at it. I'm good at it. I enjoy it. And people say, well, are you good at something because you enjoy it? Don't try to separate those two things. It's this circle, right? And I call this a joy strength. So what is it in your business that's a joy strength? In my world, I love this stuff. I mentioned this to you earlier. I just love dyadic conversations. I love getting with somebody and just talking about stuff that matters to both of us and just getting excited about it. That is a joy strength to me, right? I don't want to delegate that to somebody else. I want to do it. So what in your business, and it may be several things, do you want to do? Remember, you're driving the bus as an owner, and then you take everything else, I mean everything else, and you find a who for it. You find the right who. Sure. And I don't mean you dump it on this poor guy that is already working for you. I mean you find somebody who wants what you don't want to do, and they're as excited about it as you are about your joy strengths. This is their joy strength. And I explain this to people, and they say, well, okay, I hate doing taxes at the end of the month. I hate payroll taxes, right? Nobody enjoys payroll taxes. And I guarantee you, in a planet of 8 billion people, there is somebody somewhere right now doing payroll taxes and thinking, I just died and went to heaven. This is a ball, right? That's
they'll
just
never
how
be
we
on
are.
my show. I can't do that. Exactly. That's awesome.
But that's the thing. So you find somebody who gets off on that, you hand that stuff, you transfer those tasks to him, and then you focus on your joy strengths. Now, guess what? Your joy strengths are where you can make the biggest contribution to your customers, to your family, to your community, to your business. That's how you squeeze the most juice out of what you got to give, doing your joy strengths. So now what I'm selling to businesses, if you will, is having 10 times more success and working less, and the work you do is what you love. And you put all that together and it gets pretty powerful.
Sure.
It's like an unstoppable force, but it takes some reworking of your mind. You have to have some new mind shifts going on, some new
Sure.
frameworks in your head, because otherwise you'll do the old stuff. You'll say, I can't let go of this because I don't know if it's going to get done right. Or
Yeah.
right, that's the classic
Yeah.
ownership mentality,
You
and
got to do it yourself.
yeah, yep, that's a disaster. So anyway, that's sort of how this whole picture fits together.
So I have a couple questions here as we start to land. We're already close to our time. It's crazy how quick that went. Um, th- I have a bunch of people listening right now that if they could call in, they'd be like, all right, I love what I'm hearing, but I got one big question is how in the world do I pay for all this? Because I don't have the money. I can't afford to, hire five guys. I can't afford to hire one guy, blah, blah, blah. How do you address the whole concept of paying for this in that particular spot? And granted, we only looked at 3 of the 10, and we'll hope that a bunch of people buy How to Make the Impossible Easy book. I'm just curious, how do you help somebody that's wrestling with that right now?
Well, so there's some complexity in this only because it's different from situation to situation. But let's do the 30,000-foot view of this. Okay.
Sure.
Let's take something as simple as an executive assistant. Okay. I deal with so many entrepreneurs who are just so overscheduled. They're running themselves ragged. And they say, what should I do? And the first thing I say is take some time off. And they look at me like I'm crazy. Right?
Exactly. Yep.
But I want them to take some time off. I want them to realize there's life beyond beyond this thing called work. And the question is, do you work for the company or does the company work for you? Right? That's the thing. It's your company.
Right.
But then if they don't have this, I always say, get an executive assistant. Well, I can't afford that. That's the first thing they say. What would it cost you? I mean, it might cost me, and fill in the blank, right? It might cost me 30 grand or 60 grand or something. I remember saying this to a guy who was just desperate. And I said, I actually know somebody who would be terrific as an executive assistant. He said, oh man, I want to talk to that person. I said, what's it worth to you? He said, I would pay anything. I said, well, this person asks for X. And he goes, oh, I can't afford that. And it just cracks you up. But if you think about it, if you take this all literally and you say, okay, your biggest contribution to your business is whatever your joy strengths are. And again, you've had to do some thinking here, and that's part of the coaching program, guiding you through this to help you discover what it is you really want to do in your business, what you really get off on and contribute. If you could spend, let's say 80%, we aren't even going for 100% yet. If you could spend 80% of your time doing that, would your business do better? And the answer is, of course it would. It'd go off the charts.
Right.
Then do you think an executive assistant who could take a whole bunch of tasks off you could help? Yeah. So that's the first thing. It's getting stuff off your desk. That's the first thing to somebody who really wants to do that, right? Somebody who loves organizing, who loves doing the detail crap that most, you can hear how I say this, right? The detail crap that most entrepreneurs don't want to do, right? That's the first step. And then beyond that, you start looking at other things. But each one, if you really get down to it, it ends up paying for itself. It pays for itself hugely. If you've got marketing that's giving you a 10% growth rate, what happens? What's it worth to you to get marketing that would give you a 10x growth? And then you do the math and say, oh, I'm crazy not to do that, right?
Sure.
So let me can I just have time to do one quick wrinkle?
Absolutely.
Sometimes the right who is an it.
Okay.
I'm talking about something like AI here. And I'll give you an example. I wanted to do a newsletter. I wanted to do a newsletter unlike any other newsletter that surfaced the stories and the wisdom of people who accomplish the impossible every day. That's what I wanted. And I had a name for it, If Anything Were Possible. Love that name, right? Very powerful frame, If Anything Were Possible. So I was doing the math about how many people I'd have to hire to do this. Hire somebody to find the articles, hire somebody to edit it, hire somebody to put it together and distribute. And then I found this company that does it all with AI for this much instead of this much, right?
Sure. Yep.
And so I was a skeptic because how good could it be? And it ends up being better than I could have produced myself with my own team at a fraction. So my who became an it.
Mhm.
because I was able to prompt it in a way to get exactly what I wanted.
Yep.
And AI is all around us. There's so many opportunities to take something that you're doing personally, or your people, your team's doing, and
Right.
offload it to AI so that they can do 10x more than they're doing right now. So that's just
Right.
a thought in the back of your mind.
That's fantastic. And it's just we could sit here all day and talk about this, and I want to
Right.
make sure that the listener is able to understand your journey because, like I mentioned before we jumped on, Keith, a lot of people listening are in corporate America and they love to hear the journey. So, did you start in corporate America way back when or recently, or, walk us from there to kind of where you are, give us the 2-minute version of that. That'd be fantastic.
Well, like most entrepreneurs, when I was in college, I studied government.
Yeah, there you go. Oh my God, you and
In
one
other
other
words,
person. There you
in
go.
other words, had nothing to do with anything that I did, but I had to work my way through school, and I did it by selling,
Okay.
and that got me hooked in this idea of being an entrepreneur. So I ended up, I wasn't an entrepreneur at first. I ended up working for little companies and having a ball, making a lot of money, and then eventually working for companies where I was part owner. So part of this whole entrepreneurial thing, and it got better and better and better, and it was really a cool path. Most of it, essentially all of it, in the technology space. I'm a total geek. So the way I enjoyed selling so much was I sold stuff that I loved. I don't know how to sell something to people that they don't want. Haven't a clue how to do that. But if they
Sure.
want it, I'm your man, right? And I would pick some really cool technology. So toward the end of my high tech career, so this is all entrepreneurial stuff. And then I joined this company that was a small company, and they wanted to start a new team in a new area, and they hired me to do this. Gave me some ownership and the whole thing. And 3 years into this, we were very successful. The company was called lynda.com. They were in online training. They were bought by LinkedIn. So now somebody who's been his life in entrepreneurial tiny companies is working for this monster company, right? And of course, I didn't want to do that. So I was ready to leave, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They gave me some more ownership, and it's like, okay, I can see what this is like. So I learned a whole bunch of stuff being in a big company.
Sure.
Not all good stuff,
Mhm.
but a lot of stuff that you shouldn't do. That's
Sure.
that's learning too, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And then Microsoft bought LinkedIn. So now I'm part of at the time they were the most valuable company on the planet. And I'm
Yeah.
somehow part of this thing because of this path that I'd taken, not because I wanted to be part of a big company. So again, I was going to leave, didn't want any part of it. They were really nice, made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I stayed with them for about 3 years. And then I finally got to the point where I said, okay, I think I've learned what I'm going to learn from big companies. I want to get back to being an entrepreneur, but I want to hang out my own shingle, just my own shingle, and teach people what I've learned in this kind of crazy journey. So that's where
Yeah.
this came, and that's been now 4.5 years. And then I wrote a couple of books, and I'd already written a book that was very successful about goal setting. And then I wrote a book about questions called Magic Questions because goal setting and questions are closely related. And then this idea came to me of to really go extraordinary, you have to embrace the impossible. And that's where the latest book comes from, which is How to Make the Impossible Easy. And then I wrote a novel in there too, a thriller about quantum computing. But that's another topic. Longer
Oh,
show.
yeah. No, that's awesome. And I think it's funny because we try to caveat this by saying there's no right or wrong way to enter into being an entrepreneur. We've got some people that, I had one guy on my show, Keith, that he got married 6 days later. He quit his job, didn't tell his wife, came home, quit his job, and said, honey, I quit my job. I'm starting this company. And he's like, yeah, don't do that. Okay. That
Yeah.
doesn't work well, right?
Yeah.
For anything.
Yeah.
So we had that, and then we have people that it took almost their whole career before they did. There's no right or wrong way. We
Nope.
just love to hear, the journey for each individual. So I greatly appreciate you sharing that. One last question, I'm gonna let you go. What would your tip of the day be, Keith, for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that you shared already, and maybe it's something burning on your heart that you want to get out. But feel free to share a tip of the day for our listeners if you could.
It's a very simple thought, and it's the heart of everything I teach and everything I coach. And this is it. You will never understand what is possible in your own life until you embrace what is impossible.
Wow. Now you got to let that sink in because I still am trying to gather that. So I'm going to take some time after and think about that. So I appreciate you sharing that. For people that want to learn more about you, there's people right now listening that are like, man, this is awesome. I want to learn more. I want to grab a copy of your book. Maybe they want to connect with you. Maybe they want you to talk to them about coaching. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
So the book's on Amazon, How to Make the Impossible Easy. The easiest way to connect with me is my website, which is keithellis.com, KEITHELLIS.com. And when you get there, you can sign up to watch a little movie. And the movie is sort of a deeper dive into this impossibility thinking we've been talking about.
Okay.
But whether you, and there are other things you do after that, whether you proceed or not, just by signing up to watch the movie, you get a download of the first 3 breakthroughs from this book.
Oh,
And
wow.
these are the breakthroughs we've been talking about.
Sure, sure, great.
And they are powerful, but you get that free as a PDF just for signing up, and people seem to really like that. So,
That's perfect. So it's keithellis.com.
yeah.
You're also on LinkedIn, so jump on, connect with him there as well. And again, what I say every week is there's so much that just got unpacked here in the last 50 minutes. So rather than jump into your next topic, your next activity, kind of think of, what's one takeaway? What's one thing that you can do from this? Because we're in that age of information where we're just constantly, consuming it. But it's not, I don't see it changing as nearly as much people's lives as it needs to. So take a minute, think about what we talked about. Maybe it was one of the breakthroughs. Maybe impossible is not your opinion. It's is your opinion not a fact? Maybe it's something about what you think is impossible. Let's try to find ways around that. And again, if you get stuck, please reach out to Keith. He's definitely approachable, as you can tell, and he'd be happy to help any way that he can. So thank you, Keith, so much for hanging out with us. Who Not How is the book that I want to look at. I want to look at How to Make the Impossible Easy, The Astonishing Secret of the 10x Superpower. Amazon gets all our money when we have them sell on Amazon,
Yeah.
It's like I think you get like 30 cents a book or something. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh. But that's awesome. So thank you again, Keith, for hanging out with us, and I can't wait to keep learning from you.
Thank you so much, Dave. This has been great. Delighted to be here.